Are you looking forward to summer fun with your kids? Picnics on the beach, swimming, cycling, volleyball?
Have fun this summer. Just remember to stay safe. To help you and your children enjoy the months ahead, we'll share summer safety tips on this week's Health Talk.
We are up next.
Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Mazer.
And I'm Dr. Vicki Smitak. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce to you my daughter, Wednesday, who is here as our guest, along with her friend Ariana. So Wednesday and Ariana are 6th graders at Western Middle School, and they are going to tell us everything we need to know about summer safety, Eric.
Very special show.
Yes.
And you're going to teach us about summer safety for kids and adults, but I think mainly we're going to be talking about kids because you guys are out during the summer, you're out of school, and you've been working on this with your mom. So tell us a little bit about summer safety.
What kinds of things? First of all, maybe we can talk about categories. Maybe we'll talk about sun exposure, right? Because that's a biggie, right? In the summertime, we're out and about. So tell us a little bit, Wednesday, about sun exposure and what you know about it.
So I think it's really important to always wear sunscreen during the summer because if you don't, and especially if you have like fair skin, you can get burned easily. And it's really never fun to get burned.
Absolutely.
So always apply sunscreen. Usually.
Isn't it cool to be tan?
Yeah.
Or is it less cool to be tan now?
But I think for me, I'd rather be not tan than burnt.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Yeah. We do have a bottle here. Ariana, why don't you show us? This has an SPF of, I think it's a 70, which is a pretty high factor. Do you usually use sunscreen in the summer also? Okay. And your skin tends to get more tan, I think, than burned. But even so, it doesn't mean, and that's the message we really want to get out there. What do you want to tell folks at home? Even if you tan, you should
always
apply
sunscreen.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and number-wise, does it matter what the number is on the sunscreen?
You know, that's a good question, Eric. I think, we place so much emphasis on the number being a super high number, right? We'll go into stores and we'll see SPF above 100 or above 90. Anything over 30, I think, is reasonable for kids to...
That's my understanding, too, is that the higher numbers really don't mean anything. I guess one of the big things is to reapply it. If you're going swimming, to reapply it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I think our culture it's unfortunate because we all think it's beautiful to be tan.
Right.
But that's really just a sign of damage to your skin.
Right.
And when you get old, it
and then you get wrinkles when you get old, right? So we've talked about that, and nobody wants to get wrinkles prematurely, right?
So one of the ways to stay young and beautiful is to keep your skin from getting tan. Right. And hopefully kids will think less of that. So easy to get burned.
What about other areas of your body, though? Maybe, Ariana, you can tell us, or Wednesday. So sunscreen goes on your skin, and we want to make sure that your skin is protected. But there's an area that we don't always think about, right? But it's important to protect also.
Like our ears, our
neck, and also
our shoulders especially.
Yeah, our head usually, you can't really, for me, especially for girls, since you have a lot of hair, you can't really put on sunscreen in your head.
That's right.
So what I do is I always wear a hat. So during the summer, I always have my hat on, and then my head won't get burned.
Yes, because you can get actually sunburn on your head, right? And we've seen this happen to friends of ours, and certainly if you don't have a lot of hair on your head as we age, some of us
men particularly,
probably still not the best idea
right here
to
that focuses the sun and gets burned.
Right, and you can put sunscreen on your head, absolutely. So for those folks who, young boys who have very short haircuts, that applies to also. So it's very important to keep the head covered.
And how about clothing? We do talk about sun protective clothing. I don't know whether you guys use that at all?
Well, what I do is whenever I'm out in the sun for like long periods of time, whether on vacation, because a couple weeks I was on vacation, and we went on a boat trip. So what I did is I wanted to make sure I always had like my t-shirt on because my shoulders burned really quickly.
Yes.
So as long as I had my t-shirt on, the sun couldn't get through, or at least not that easily. Right. And my shoulders didn't get burned.
Yeah, and Ariana pointed that out before. Also, shoulders are a very sensitive area, and also
and
like
the eyelids also. People don't. I've seen eyelids burned before.
Yeah, so sunglasses are very useful for that, right?
And I know that a lot of times they will say on the sunscreen that it's waterproof, but it really isn't. I think the recommendations are if you go in to swim, you should put sunscreen back on when you come out. And I think it's easy also to be burned if you're doing a lot of floating or snorkeling or something like that, you can get burned right in the water.
Right, because the water, I mean, that's where you're still exposed, so you should have sunscreen on all the time. So talking about water a little bit, we should talk a little bit about water safety, right? So in the summer, what's one of your favorite activities? Ariana, what do you love to do in the summer?
I love to swim in the pool.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. So tell us a little bit about pool safety and what kinds of rules do you follow and what kinds of rules should we put out there for our entire audience that's watching at home?
You should always know your swim level. Like if you need a life vest, you should always wear one.
Yep.
And also, you should always have an adult around and a lifeguard near, even if you know how to swim. Having an adult around is good. So like if something happens, then
there's somebody
can
there.
get you. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So having another friend your age in the pool, does that sort of make up for having an adult there?
Not really. I think you probably want somebody older there.
Yes, I think that's a good point. I mean, if you always have a buddy, I mean, that should be like a baseline requirement, but having an adult nearby or in the pool with you is really important.
Drowning accidents are tragedies that absolutely should be prevented.
Sure.
And it can happen so quickly. You know, you have a child that is not a good swimmer or happens to be clothed, falls in the pool, and it's only a couple minutes and they can be gone. So I think parents be vigilant too. I think
and keeping the pools, having pools that are fenced in as opposed to pools that are open. I mean, I think everybody at this point has heard the message many, many times, but we'll get it out there again that pools should have at least a 4-foot tall fence around them. They should be completely fenced in. They should be, the gate should be locked. To minimize risk of younger children falling in.
Yeah, like younger kids running in.
Right. And little kids love the water. I have 2 little grandchildren. I've got 2 your age, but 2 little grandchildren. They love the pool, but they can't swim.
Right.
So you got to be really careful because they want to go in the water, but they need somebody around. So putting on a pair of swimmies or something like that is not adequate life protection. You've got to supervise them.
Yeah, so having those floaties or I mean, it's good to have a life vest on, and I think that, you know, if you're going on a boat or if you're going to be near a dock or something like that, you should definitely have a life vest, but just because you have little floaties on your arms doesn't mean that you can now go into
Do you girls both swim? Do you both know how to swim?
Yeah, I love to swim.
Yeah, same.
And then, how old were you when you learned?
Not exactly
I don't
sure.
know. I remember I took like younger swim classes when I was like small.
Yeah, I started taking classes in preschool, I remember.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think Vicki, maybe you could say something to that from the pediatric standpoint, but it seems to me kids ought to be exposed to and learn how to swim as soon as they're able to.
From a pretty early age, and I think that there are some kids, Eric, who resist it, and I was actually listening to a couple have this conversation the other day where the child was, I don't know, 2 or 3, and every time they'd bring him to swim class, it was a disaster. And at that point, you have to pull back and say, okay, we're going to give it 6 months, and then, but put them back and keep reattempting
well, I remember
because it's a
my
life
youngest
skill.
granddaughter was up to the age of 2 or 3 was very reluctant to put her head under the water. It was very uncomfortable.
It's a very strange feeling.
And now you can't get her out of the pool, but when they're ready, when you can do that, and some kids get in the water when they're infants and seem to be happy and enjoy it. And
but it's misleading to think that just because a young child can swim and they've taken swim classes that you can leave them in the pool and sit at the poolside and have drinks with friends. That happens actually more often than not.
I'm only smiling because one of my granddaughters swam fairly early. And we had a word for it, drowning or something, because it looked like she was drowning, even though she was swimming. It looked like it was a last resort to keep her head above water, and yet she was able to sustain it. But I absolutely agree. Don't assume anything.
Parents have to be within an arm's length.
Don't assume anything. Yeah, even if your kids are good swimmers.
Yeah, just always be in the pool with them, just like the girls said, and always be the American Academy of Pediatrics really recommends that parents or an adult provider be at arm's length of any child 5 and under while they're in a swimming pool or any body of water.
And are there any special precautions for the beaches? Because we are in a coastal community here. We can go to beaches with large waves, and there's some very special dangers there. Yeah,
the biggest, I think, and these girls said it, I think having a lifeguard, swimming in a beach area or somewhere where there's a lifeguard, so that if you get pulled in, right, you can signal and the lifeguard will come.
Sometimes there won't be lifeguards though, so you have to make sure you have an adult. Like they'll say, no lifeguard on duty.
Yes.
Swim at your own risk.
Right.
Like
so always have a parent.
So make sure you always have somebody with you.
Yeah, a swim buddy, being an adult, somebody who's going to go out with you if you feel comfortable enough to go swim out in the ocean. You should never do it.
Especially in the ocean, the waves are really strong. They can be strong sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, so if you go out and you get pulled in, you can't come back, you're going to need to yell for somebody. Yeah. So that's why it's so important.
And use common sense, because again, some of the waves, not necessarily on the sound, but as we get out to some of the ocean beaches that are not too far away, can be quite big at times.
They can be.
And they can be dangerous, and they can really take you and knock you unconscious, or they can rip currents can pull you out. So
Sure.
I think you've got to be very, very, very aware of that. Enjoy the beach, but don't be cavalier. Don't be
do it
too relaxed
safely.
about it.
So these girls are really experts, and I know that they brought some other, you guys have some
Yeah, what other
props here.
stuff do you think guys do for yourself to stay safe?
Well, during the summer, I especially love to ride my bicycle and my skateboard.
Mm-hmm.
But when I leave the house to go ride my bike, the one thing I never go without is my helmet.
Right?
So I think it's always really important to ride a helmet when you ride a bike, because if you fall, that helmet's always going to be there for you to help you. It might not save you. You could still get like a cut or something on your knee.
Right.
But it's one of the most important parts is your head.
That's right.
So you don't get like a concussion or something. So the helmet is
Or
always
worse.
really important.
Or worse,
Speaking
absolutely.
of like having cuts on your knees or whatever, like knee pads or
Yeah, for
shoulder pads,
beginner riders,
things like that.
there's always like knee pads and
yeah.
stuff.
That's
It's
right.
kind of
These
what
are like, you can grip onto the handles if you need to, so your hands don't slip off of the handles.
That's a good
So,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
those are other things.
And skateboarders, don't they have actual wrist splints which prevent them from
I think so.
falling and
I think
hurting
so,
their
yeah.
wrist? Let me ask you though, among the kids, again, when my kids were growing up, which was lots of years ago, it wasn't cool to wear this stuff. I think that's changing now, isn't it? And
Yeah.
is it still looked down on, or is just people expect you to be wearing a helmet and expect you to be wearing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really, we've made some progress then.
Oh, a lot of progress. And maybe in the last minute or so that we have left, I would love it if you guys could show us the appropriate way to wear a helmet, because there's a right way and a wrong way, like with everything else, right? And if you're wearing your helmet the wrong way, you're really not getting as much of a benefit from it,
You
right?
want to make sure it's strapped on
Yeah.
just in case.
So first, you're going to make sure that this kind of like long part in the front, like it's also on this one as well. Like in hers it's black, but mine's white.
There you go.
You're going to make sure that's always in the front.
Right?
So you're going to put it on, just like you would put on anything else.
How snug should it be, Ariana? Should it be really tight on your head, or?
it shouldn't be super duper tight, but it shouldn't be like super loose.
But it should fit
Yeah.
It should
just
fit,
right.
yeah.
And so then what you're going to do is you have to strap it at the bottom. What I always do is when I strap
And
it,
then
I
pull it
make
maybe a
sure
little.
that there's not too much space down here.
That's a good point.
Because if there's a lot, it could just if you riding your bike and
It
then
could
you
just, like,
fall,
get
it could
loose.
just fall.
And
the
just
helmet
slide
could fall
off.
off.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I always do is I want to make sure mine's nice and tight, but not too tight, because then it could choke you, and that would not be a pleasant experience.
Okay.
So you want to, so if there's a fall, the hat stays on top. And the last thing, I think there's something, if you're out in hot weather, what's the other important thing?
Hydration.
Hydration.
So I'm
That's a
glad
big
you
word.
guys
What does it
brought-
mean for the people at home that don't know what hydration is?
Okay, so one thing you always want to do, really any season, is always make sure you have water with you. I always carry around my water bottle, but it's really important to always drink water, especially in the summer when it's really hot and you get dehydrated quickly.
So Ariana, what happens if you were to get really dehydrated? Do you know what are some of the symptoms that somebody might feel when they get really, really dry?
They could be dizzy, have a headache.
Yes.
I don't know, they wouldn't feel very well.
They wouldn't feel, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. That's exactly what happens. You get dizzy, you get a little woozy, you don't feel quite right, and then you can actually pass out. You can actually faint and hit your head as you're going down. So it can actually be a lot more dangerous than we think when
And
we
it's
think
probably
about
better to
hydration.
drink when you're a little thirsty or not thirsty
Yeah.
than to wait till you're dehydrated and catching
then
up.
drink.
Yeah.
So if you're out biking or playing anything, makes sense to me that you should take a break every 15 or 20
Every
minutes.
15 or
and-
20 minutes, that's exactly what the recommendations are. So you got it
I
right on
guessed
the
it.
head. So anything else before we go to our break, girls, that you think is important? I think we covered quite a few safety tips.
And one last thing is
Yes.
I think it's just, other than safety, during the summer, I just think it's always important to stay active and healthy.
That's a nice way to end the
Yeah.
segment. So
And we want kids to be active. So is active on the video game? Is that keeping you
No.
active?
No,
I
like
love-
That gives you good
outside,
thumbs, but-
maybe running.
Playing sports.
Yeah,
That's
it's
exactly
so
right.
important for all of us to do that, and I think we're seeing less and less of that. So I want to thank our very special guest today for coming on the show.
Thank
We'll be
you.
back after a short break to talk a little bit more about summer safety with an expert from the EMS, Emergency Medical Service. Hi, Vicki and I are back with Lynn Ryder. She's a paramedic with Norwalk Hospital. Also, you go out to the community and speak to kids in their classrooms about safety. So as we approach the summer, what are your biggest recommendations?
Well, there's many unintentional injuries that we see out in the field. Falls, traffic related motor vehicle accidents, injuries that happen as a result of that. There are many things that could be prevented in our
Before
community.
the show, you mentioned an extraordinary statistic that I think really hit home to me.
Yeah. About 24 children are killed each day in the United States due to an injury that was not intended.
That's really
That's
staggering.
like one
if
an
we think
hour.
Of that.
Yes,
just,
that's what they're saying.
as you said, staggering, Vicki.
Right.
And the
That's-
tragedy that each one of those
And
represents.
millions more are injured or seen in the emergency department that produce disability or chronic pain from years after.
Yeah, so I know in the previous segment with the girls, we focused a lot specifically on summer safety, and that's important, and it's seasonal, and in some places it's not, it's all year round. But regardless, I think that you know there are other areas where children can get injured, motor vehicle accidents, which is all year round.
Traffic related.
Right, anything traffic related. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that and being distracted at the wheel, because that's really the new era that we're living in, and whether the law says that you can or cannot do it, everybody is still, as we see at traffic lights, on their cell phones checking messages.
Well, that's
and I don't know that there's any way to fix that. I mean, I have to tell you, I was thinking about that on my
Well,
way
actually,
home the other day, and I said, there are laws against this, and people get tickets and all this kind of
There
stuff,
was
but at the end of the
discussion,
day,
there is technology apparently where they can create a jamming signal within the driver's compartment that will not allow your your cell phone to send or to receive or send out messages, and they, perhaps that will be the ultimate
I think
solution.
that
Is
how
your
it
phone
will
will
be
not work in the car
in years
anymore.
to come. But
Right.
for right now, as adults or as parents, we can first set the example.
yes.
We should not be on our cell phones when driving. We should not be texting, because whether a child is 4 years old or 14 years old,
They observe that.
see that behavior. So that's number one.
And even if you think you can do it safely, you can't do it safely.
You cannot.
Right.
No, it shouldn't even be anywhere in your reach. Next is for smaller children, getting them in the right size car seat based upon their weight, their height, their age, etc. As they move into the booster seat, keeping them in the booster seat. The safest place for all children under the age of 13 is in the back seat. Somewhere around 4th or 5th grade, kids start venturing into the front
everybody
seat.
wants to sit in the front
That is
seat.
not the safest place. The motor, the engine, the airbag, they can all become forward in a traffic accident and actually harm or
these
kill.
airbags, which are built, my understanding, to keep an adult from crashing into the. But there's such velocity that
Yes. They can
really
children
hurt
So much
can
force.
really be injured by the
Yes.
airbag.
So keeping them in the back seat, wearing your seatbelt. Everybody wears the seatbelt before the car goes into drive.
Sure.
Can I ask you a question? That's certainly been in my lifetime one of the most major. That and the smoking cessation probably been two of the major public health safety.
You've witnessed
I've witnessed,
transformation
but
and the way we live our lives.
I was just
Eric.
thrown in the back seat. I was thrown in the front
So was
seat.
I.
Throw the baby next to the driver so the mother could.
Right.
But are you seeing? It seems to me that we are using seatbelts in our society now. But as somebody who's out in the field and seeing car accidents,
There are still people that choose not to wear their
There
seatbelt.
really are, huh?
And we see the effects of that because they make cars, the manufacturers these days make cars really well. The types of injuries that I'm seeing today versus 15 years ago, completely different. People can flip their cars 3 and 4 times as long as they have their safety belt on. Most of the time when we get there, they're talking on their cell phone, calling for a ride.
That's really
It's
something.
those that do not wear the seatbelt. Still today, we are seeing unnecessary deaths and serious injuries because people choose not to put on that seatbelt.
And that's really something that is so hard to comprehend with all the education that's out there. I mean, it's similar to smoking cessation, like you
Right.
mentioned, right? We have so much data, we have so much knowledge about the effectiveness of seatbelt use, and yet, like you said, there are individuals who are making a conscious choice despite having been educated, because I have a hard time believing that that message hasn't gotten to every single member of our society one way or the other.
Yeah.
And yet it still becomes a conscious choice on some folks' part. Yeah, that's
I
hard to
think
deal
going
with.
back to the infant car seat, again, I have two twin grandchildren who are in car seats. And what I found there is we use the car seats religiously, but sometimes we don't get the straps tight enough. That it's easy for them to become loosened up with use, and we may, in a rush, you put the kid in, you don't realize. So I think that's something additional, is to be sure that the straps are set each time as the kid gets in there. Usually such a struggle to get the kids in.
That's right.
Once you get in, you, thank God it snapped, and then you walk away.
No, but I have to tell you, Eric, I remember a horrible situation when I was a fellow in New York going through my critical care training. We had a child brought in, specifically that situation where the straps were not tight enough, and the mother was driving at night and didn't notice, and the child actually died as slipping through and strangulated, and was brought in. Unfortunately, we weren't able to resuscitate. So that, certain cases like that haunt you. Like this was, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe more, that I had seen that.
When you talk about preventable harm, I mean, these are kids that should be well today. Should be, and to lose that kind of life is just
it's really
sort of
unimaginable.
Unimaginably tragic. We were talking before the show. I think you had an interesting point. We talk a lot about bicycle equipment safety, but I hear less about bicycle driver safety even than I used to. What are the rules for bicycle? And I don't think we're very good about it. Before I even say that, I see an awful lot of bicyclists ignoring stop signs, going through red lights, making believe that the rules of the road don't pertain to them. And it seems to me that's quite dangerous. If you could say something about that, Lynn.
It is. I mean, a bicyclist, whether they're 5 years old or 15 years old or 35 years old, needs to learn the rules of the road. There are many towns and cities, including Norwalk, that have bicycle safety lanes that they should remain in. I mean, unfortunately, bicyclists are still being struck despite them following the rules because of distracted drivers. So as a bicyclist, if that's your chosen sport, you need to be observant. Intersections that you go through, learning the rules of the road, of course wearing your helmet, staying well hydrated, just being alert of your surroundings. Reflective gear.
Maybe we could say that the bicyclist should drive on the right side of the road, just
with traffic.
Now the rules for walking on the road are just the opposite, aren't they? You walk on the opposite side, facing traffic.
And pedestrians should cross in crosswalks. That's where drivers expect them to cross, not in between cars or in the middle of the road. So pedestrian safety is something else that we can teach our children.
Right. What about recommendations for headgear, like listening to music while you're biking or running? Because I would
you
imagine
won't be
that's
aware
what everybody
of your
does.
surroundings as well if you are listening. So whether you're running on the road, having the headphones is a distraction, as well as you can't hear what's around you.
That's right. I just can't imagine, though. I mean, again, speaking for the other side, how a runner would get by doing even a couple of miles without having something to listen to. So then you just have to be really vigilant in making sure that you're running, or walking facing traffic, like you said, Eric, so that at least even if you don't hear, you're seeing. And that's probably why those rules are in place.
The more you have to just be aware that drivers are distracted.
And that's the new reality. That really is the new reality.
That is. So we've had tragedies here in Norwalk because of distracted drivers. So
is that the most common injury you see to children? Is traffic related, driving related?
Falls. There's a bunch of injuries that we see, but many of them can be prevented.
Let me ask you, we didn't talk about this before the show, but given the ubiquitous cell phone and this ubiquitous, the ability to stay in touch, do you see parents getting distracted from caring for their child because they're busy doing something on a cell phone?
Yes.
So there's cell phones they're wonderful devices, but it seems like they've
really taken over what we do, how we live our lives. I mean, I don't want to sound terribly dated,
sitting in the swimming pool, reading some email, and you've got a toddler around the pool. As we discussed in the first segment, it doesn't take very long to drown.
No.
Right. And it absorbs you in a different way than maybe sitting around the pool and having a conversation with 2 or 3 friends, which is more typically what used to happen.
Right.
you know, at least there's
You're
some
observant.
periphery, there's some, you know,
Right.
acknowledgement that there are children playing nearby. Whereas once you get engrossed in your
You're
work, you're
involved.
looking at emails or you're on social media,
Yes.
it just
becomes-
absorbs you completely.
That's it.
It's like I relate it to the way a child is playing a video game, you know, and I can tell you, trying to get my 8-year-old son detached from any video game that he might be involved with, it is, you can't get their attention. And that's how folks are with their phones and
Yes.
social media.
But with phones, you have the ability to call 911
Yes.
that much faster, as well as putting the poison control number into your
that's a
cell
very good
phone,
idea.
so you can have that available.
Where can people find that? Do they just look at poison control on the internet?
Poison, yes,
And they can get the number. That's a great idea to put that right into your phone.
right into your phone,
Yeah.
and 911 as well.
Yeah. So there are definitely positives, absolutely. I
Yes.
don't want to sound completely negative
But it,
about
but
it.
it is
it's,
distracting.
it is
No, but I
definitely-
think we could say that if you have other responsibility, you're driving a car, you're watching a child around the swimming pool, you're running, you have to be careful about distractions. Because it's very, I think people talk about multitasking.
Yeah.
The human being doesn't multitask.
They do
You-
one task
You want
at
to
a
do one
time.
task. You may think you're multitasking, but
Yes.
you're just switching from one to another.
Right.
And if you're doing the task of something on the telephone, you're not watching your child
Right.
around the pool.
Right.
And I don't know, that's
Or at
one-
the playground,
or on the playground, and
or
they,
at home.
they can get into trouble very, very quickly.
So there are some things that we can do to prevent. We can put our medications up high
Right.
or in a locked cabinet. Cleaning supplies should not be where a small child can access them. We can put gates at the top and the bottom of the stairs. So there are things we can do in the home to
You have
prevent.
to be careful about bookshelves. I've got young ones at home. Bookshelves
Yeah.
and movable furniture. Because the
Televisions.
kids will get up on the
Yeah.
shelf or something, and
Yes.
they
That's
a
can
great point.
leverage it over on top
Or
of
flat
themselves.
screen TV should be on the
Anchored
wall.
somehow, yeah.
And
Yeah.
these things are really attractive. I can say this with proof of my own. They're very attractive to little kids. They love pushing the buttons
Yes.
and seeing the image change.
Oh,
And they
it's
love-
the curiosity. That's how they learn, and that's how they develop.
Chemicals that are purple in a bottle, which looks like grape soda.
Or just a very pretty color, right?
Yeah.
You want to see what that's
So,
all about.
We have no time left, but we remember
Yeah.
one child an hour is killed in this country,
Yes.
a preventable death, and that kind of tragedy nobody should ever have to experience. And we can't
Absolutely
afford
not.
that loss.
Thank you so much
Thank
for all
you
the
so
great work
much.
for
that you
having
do.
me.
If you at home have a question you'd like to ask us on Health Talk, please contact Vicki and me at healthtalk@norwalkhealth.org.
Eric and I would like to thank our guests today, Wednesday, Ariana and Lynn Ryder, for coming on our show. And we will see you next week on Health Talk.
Stay safe and vigilant.